On the 23rd of June, the UK will vote on whether to remain or leave the EU. I speak to the Chief Executive of the official out campaign, Vote Leave, Matthew Elliott. Matthew, tell us the reasons why you think the UK should leave the EU.
I think there's one key overall reason why Britain should leave the EU. And I think a leave vote is actually the safer option for the UK. What I fear is that if Britain stays in the EU, if we remain in the EU, what's coming down the line in the sense of the impending eurozone crisis, the fact that Britain will probably have to bail out the eurozone, the threat of further powers moving from the UK to Brussels. I see a very dismal future for the UK if we stay in the EU, and I'd much rather have the brighter future, in my view, of Britain leaving, negotiating a free trade agreement with the EU, having bilateral arrangements with the EU and having good relations with our neighbours, but not being part of an emerging superstate.
The eurozone is having trouble. You think it will collapse completely?
I think the eurozone is on the verge of collapse. I think certainly certain member states who are part of the eurozone are certainly doing extremely badly. Take Greece for one example, take Italy for another. And I think what's clear is the eurozone can't actually work without the normal things that operate within a single currency area. It can't work without debt sharing between the richer parts of the eurozone, like Germany, and the poorer parts, like Greece. It can't work without any element of fiscal transfers from the richer parts, like Germany, to the poorer parts, like Portugal. It needs to have those things to work. Now, as the European Union is currently set up, it doesn't have those means. So currently speaking, I think the eurozone is set to collapse, yes.
If the UK leaves the EU, will its ability to make changes for the better also be taken away?
I think there are all sorts of ways in which the UK will still be able to affect change within the EU. I think the fact that the UK has left could actually allow a more rational EU where it has more centralisation to allow the eurozone to work, as I described before. But also it may be a wake-up call that actually the EU isn't fit and proper for the 21st century. Certainly if you look at the global picture here, the EU is now really not in a state where it can compete globally, and certainly it needs to make some quite big changes in order to be able to really prosper in the 21st century.
When people look at the UK and its position within the financial markets around the world, a lot of people look at London. What's the effect on London going to be?
The City of London has been a huge financial centre for many, many years and will continue to be. I started out my career working on the anti-Euro campaign, and I remember the doomsayers saying at that point that if Britain wasn't going to join the Euro, what you'd get is basically the collapse of the city and all the city moving to Frankfurt. It didn't happen, and I don't think it'll happen this time round. The reason why London is great as a financial centre is, first of all, people like living there, the time zone works, the language works, the legal and accountancy structure around the city works. It's got a huge footprint there that has been there for decades, much longer than our sort of EU membership. So it will continue to prosper.
But people who have financial interests in London will then no longer have financial interests in the EU. Is that something they will look for? Is that something where they'll go, I need to have financial interests in the EU, I will go to Frankfurt, for example?
I'm not sure that will happen. I mean, if you look at what happens in London, it does all sorts of transactions for companies and currencies and commodities right across the world. That's the beauty of what London is. I think it will continue to do that, even if we're not actually part of the EU. We're still, of course, part of Europe as a continent. So there'll still be those strong ties that will bind us to that system.
This all assumes that the EU is going to remain intact if the UK leaves. What do you think will happen to the other European countries if the UK decides to leave the EU?
I think actually it's a very logical thing to happen for the UK to leave, in the sense that we're not part of the Eurozone project. We're not part of Schengen. We're not actually sort of fully part of the EU as it is. What the EU needs is actually greater centralisation for the Eurozone to try and make it work. So naturally, we're moving towards much more of a sort of two-tier system, where you have the EU on the one hand with the eurozone, and then a second tier of countries who basically trade with the EU. Now, Britain would be one of those countries. Switzerland is, of course, already. Norway is. People are talking about giving Turkey greater rights to be able to trade with the EU as well. So I think, naturally speaking, you'll have that two-tier Europe emerging.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Christopher Hemmons. With me was Matthew Elliott, the CEO of the Vote Leave campaign for the EU referendum in the UK. Thank you again, and go to our website, dukascopy.tv, for more exclusive content.